Okay, I found this tweet from Robert Kiyosaki. He is one of the entrepreneurs I've been following for years. And he's a sound guy in terms of his ability to transform little money into huge wealth. Okay. But sometimes some of these motivations these people do share, it is important that we try to read meaning into it, especially entrepreneurs and those that operate within the Nigerian business sphere, because the conditions we are facing here are entirely different from what is obtainable in their own culture. They are entirely different from what is obtainable in the US. Okay, so the tweet was talking about in your mind, you should stop saying that I can't afford it. Instead, say, how can I afford it? Of course, it is a powerful motivation, but we must come to reality. For every question of how can I afford it, there must have been a question of I can't afford it, or why can't I afford it? Before you can start questioning yourself of how can you get something, you must have first acknowledged that you cannot afford it. How can I buy a car? That means you need a car. That means you cannot afford a car. So to say that you should stop questioning about stop questioning about, or stop saying that I can't afford it and focus more on saying how can I afford it. Yes, it is motivation, but the reality of it is that it doesn't always work in that way, because to solve a problem and solve it clearly, you must first acknowledge that you have a problem. Okay, you want to go to the institution, to the tertiary institution, to acquire a degree. That means you don't have that degree you want to go and study. You acknowledge that you need that degree. That is the first move. You must acknowledge that you have a problem before you can start talking about solving it. Okay, so while you are trying to be motivated, this is my own concept, you should also try to make sure that you understand the fact that you cannot afford it. Why? Why can't you afford it? Why can't you afford it? You want a car, but you cannot afford it. Why? Is it because you have the money and you don't know where they are selling it, or because you know where they are selling it and you don't have the money? So before you start telling yourself, how can I, you acknowledge the fact that you cannot. Then understand why can't you first, because that is the problem that you have. It is only when you are able to understand that problem, then you can start to ask yourself, how can I? Tell me, how can you ask yourself, how can I, when you don't have what you need to be able to? Are you getting the point? How can you afford a car when you don't have the money? Okay, so why can't I is very, very important. I can't do it is very, very important. It is not trying to be discouraging in any way. I'm just trying to say that to provide a strong solution to any problem in life, you must first acknowledge that you have a problem and then understand the root cause of that particular problem. Okay, then you will now be able to draw your Ishikawa or whatever model you are going to use to provide solution for your problem. Sometimes you might need the Kaizen, you have to progress slowly. So that mindset of how can I, it is good. But before you progress to that stage, it is important to understand that you cannot, and then be able to ask yourself and know why can't you. These are the root causes of your problem. They are the ones that will now buffer your solution by now giving you a standard of how can you. Okay, if you want a car, why can't you have the car? Is it because of the money? Then you start to ask your question, how can I get the money to buy the car? Is it because of the location, or they don't have the car you prefer at the moment? Then how can I have it? Okay, so he's a good guy. He's a successful entrepreneur. He has succeeded in many ways. But sometimes when we get all this motivation, we should try to be a little bit critical about it so that we don't make mistakes by following them completely. I have been his fan for over a decade. Okay, so I know what I'm talking about from experience. So yeah, so the conclusion of today's lesson is that before you can ask yourself, how can I? Start by asking yourself, why can't you? It is when you understand that you can't and you are able to find the problem, which is why can't you, before you can now move to the final stage, which is how can I? Are you getting the point? All these things are stage by stage, and just understand to follow the entrepreneurial process as it comes. Different ideas for different markets, for different environment. What works in the US might not work in Nigeria. So don't be easily discouraged because you ask yourself, how can I? And yet you don't find solution to that question. To find solution to that question, come back and ask yourself, why can't you? What are the problems that are stopping you from reaching that goal? It is when you understand them before you now ask yourself, how can I? Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in our next lesson.